An extremely impressive plane is the XB-70 Valkyrie. When you see pictures of this, it looks like it was generated by artificial intelligence, especially because of its 6 powerful jet engines at the back, which make it look like a very futuristic spaceship. This plane, by generating and using shock waves, could fly very efficiently at Mach 3. It flew so fast they had to repaint it after every landing. Everyone expected this to be the ultimate plane, but it had so many problems that people just decided to forget about it. Why did the United States want such a plane? Fast, why did it have a small wheel on the landing gear? Why did the Soviets collaborate in its development? And more importantly, what happened to all these planes? In this video, we will talk about the history of the XB-70 Valkyrie and its tragic end. So make yourself comfortable. I'm Kevin Aguilar, and this is Kunst Club. To discuss this monster, we need to go back to the 1950s, the era of interceptors and strategic bombers. The United States bomber fleet was made up mainly of the B-52 Stratofortress, which was the most modern bomber up to that point. It was incredibly efficient, capable of striking targets on the other side of the world without refueling. However, it was very slow and vulnerable. Other bombers, like the B-58 Hustler, were very fast, but they definitely didn't have enough range to strike the Soviet Union, and nowhere near the payload capacity of a B-52. Likewise, the Air Force issued a contract known as General Operational Requirement Number 38 in order to come up with a new bomber that could be as efficient as a B-52 and at the same time as fast as a B-58. Boeing and North American were the only companies that dared to meet such outrageous requirements. North American proposed an innovative design with many experimental features at the time, like variable geometry systems, canards, high-pressure air intakes, and of course its 6 engines in the rear. The feature that gave North American the contract was just one, and it was the wings that could tilt to take advantage. A phenomenon that had just been discovered at that time: compression lift. This is a fairly simple phenomenon to understand. Fast ships can surf the wave they generate themselves by going at high speed, which in turn reduces drag, making them faster. In this way, a plane traveling at supersonic speeds can create shock waves similar to the wave produced by a ship. Capturing the shock underneath the plane can increase lift, making the plane more efficient. The plane had sharp points to generate these waves, and more importantly, trap them beneath the plane. That's why you'll always see the Valkyrie flying with its nose slightly up. The unfolded wings of this one were, up to that point, the largest flying surface that had ever flown. Each wing had 150 square meters of surface area, and its total sweep was 60 degrees. It could provide 30% more lift. Something interesting about its design was its windshield. On the ground, it looks ordinary, but when it reached supersonic speeds, it would rise to optimize the airflow. Will future Concords have similar technologies? This incredible design was more than enough to far surpass everything presented by Boeing, which was a bit more traditional. North American was given the resources to start with the prototypes in '58, and they would begin working on them. However, the project's enormous size and complexity caused problems to arise quickly. One system that complicated development was the hydraulic system. Moving the heavy wings and ailerons required a large hydraulic system. This also prevented the plane from simply melting in the air. Flying at over Mach 3 would cause the aluminum fuselage to simply melt. What the engineers did was create a honeycomb of ducts under the fuselage that allowed the heat to be redistributed, and they would also run fuel through it to use as a coolant. This was a bit dangerous. The GP6 fuel could self-ignite, so the solution to the problem caused by the other solution was to inject nitrogen into the fuel. The hydraulic system also operated the landing gear so that it would be completely independent from the storage compartments. And as you can see, this one has a 5th wheel in the middle, because this wheel would skid on the runway, literally. This measured the actual speed of the plane without slipping, while another sensor on the larger wheel also detected the speed. This data was sent in real time to the braking computer to stop and continue braking repeatedly. This prevented the plane from skidding on the runway, essentially an ABS for airplanes. September the 21, 1964 was meant to be a great day for the BARC, but it turned into an unprecedented disaster for the project. On this day, the aircraft's first flight began. It took off normally, but when the pilot tried to retract the landing gear, it got stuck in a position perpendicular to the plane. Landing like that would be very dangerous, especially with fuel running through the whole fuselage. But they couldn't inject or start the first burner, as that would end the program. The crew was ordered to short-circuit the landing gear system so it would retract again, but they didn't have any tools. Fortunately, the pilot had a paperclip in his briefcase, which they used to get the job done, putting the landing gear in the correct position. It sounds crazy, but that's how it was. But that wasn't all. When they landed, both rear tires just burst into flames. Despite all these problems, the prototype was in one piece and on the ground. A few weeks later, on a third test flight, it managed to fly at Mach 1.1, breaking the sound barrier. Interestingly, after the plane exceeded supersonic speeds, its paint came off. This wasn't caused by speed, but by the extreme temperature of the fuselage. The paint peeled, and its roughness let the wind contribute. By 1965, the second prototype was finished, leading to this one. The first one had to go through a lot of tests, with a bunch of tires catching fire and general damage to the fuselage and engines. The XB-70 Valkyrie No. 2 aimed to solve all these issues. On October 14, 1965, Valkyrie 2 managed to exceed Mach 3. Interestingly, exactly 18 years after Chuck Yeager, the first person to break the sound barrier in level flight. By that time, the Soviets didn't know it, but they were actually collaborating quite a bit with the Americans in this program and in the future Strategic Reconnaissance 61 program. The high-friction parts of the Valkyrie were made of titanium. The United States didn't have titanium, so they turned to shell companies and third parties to obtain titanium from the very same Soviets. Up until that point, the program was going smoothly, and everything indicated that the Valkyrie was going to be the next great bomber of the United States. However, everything would change on June 18, 1966. That bad day, the XB-70 was flying alongside an F-4, an F-5, a T-38, and an F-104. A photo session was being done for General Electric. All these planes had engines made by this company. That's why this advertisement was being made. During the F-104 flight, while flying very close to the Valkyrie, it was caught by a vortex produced by the Valkyrie and was flipped over, falling on top of the Valkyrie and destroying the vertical stabilizers. The F-104 exploded instantly, while the XB-70 lost control and crashed in the California desert. The pilot managed to eject without any problems, but the co-pilot lost consciousness and wasn't as lucky. You might think this was what ended the program, but actually it was Kennedy. Just 3 months after taking office, he ended the program to criticize Republican defense policies, arguing that the Valkyrie had virtually no chance of penetrating Soviet defenses. However, the Department of Defense invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this project. A few years earlier, the Soviets shot down a U-2 spy plane flying at 21,000 meters. Until then, the Department of Defense believed a Soviet anti-aircraft missile couldn't shoot down anything at that altitude. And guess at what altitude the Valkyrie operated? That's right, exactly 21,000 meters. This shoot-down marked the end of strategic bombers and led to the creation and development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, which were certainly more effective and, in the long run, much cheaper. Because of all this, the Valkyrie program was canceled. The last one, XB-70 Valkyrie, was used to experiment with Mach 3 until '69, where it was transferred to the National Museum of the United States Air Force, and it remains there to this day. If you like this video, you might be interested in this one, where we talk about the airships used during World War II. I recommend it. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.